I would love to be more friendly with Kareem, but maybe he's in a different world than I am right now.
I am 52 years old. I watched basketball for over 30 years, from press row, from post-game hallways, from the kind of access that lets you see a man's face when the cameras have already turned away. I watched Magic. I watched Bird. I watched them all. But I never watched anyone carry the weight that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar carried. Not the championships, not the skyhook, not the records. Something older than all of that. Something theological. Because for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, basketball was never just basketball. It was a courtroom. And he has been issuing verdicts since 1968 that he has absolutely no intention of reversing. Nobody has told this story honestly until right now. Stay with me, because what I watched over 30 years, what people told me in quiet corners after games, it explains a man the world thinks it knows and does not know at all. When Kareem converted to Islam in 1968, he did not just change his name. He absorbed a moral framework that would govern every relationship, every rivalry, and every judgment he made for the rest of his life. In Islamic doctrine, there exists one unforgivable sin: shirk, the association of partners with God, placing false idols where only the sacred belongs. Kareem took that concept and made it secular. For him, the struggle for black dignity was sacred, and those who betrayed it committed an unforgivable sin. That framework has never changed. He is 78 years old, and it has not softened by a single degree. Here is what people say about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They say he was distant, private, difficult to like. They say he never smiled enough for the cameras. They say he made people uncomfortable. Here is what actually happened. Kareem was the most principled man in a league that rewarded performance and punished principle. He boycotted the 1968 Olympics to protest the treatment of Black Americans. He stood with Muhammad Ali when Ali refused Vietnam. He did these things when they cost him enormously, not after they became safe. The discomfort people felt around Kareem was not his coldness. It was their own conscience. And the men he never forgave were not his enemies. They were men who had the same platform he had and made different choices with it. Wilt Chamberlain is the deepest wound. A man named Gerald had covered the league since the early 60s, sat next to me at a press event in 1991, and told me he had just read Wilt's new book. He put it down on the table and said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "That man just burned every bridge he ever had with one chapter." Wilt and Kareem had history that went back to before Kareem entered the league. Wilt had taken the young Lou Alcindor under his wing, shared his wisdom, his social world, his understanding of what it meant to be that large and that visible in America. There was genuine warmth there, a mentor and a student. Then the 60s demanded a choice. Kareem chose the movement. Wilt chose Richard Nixon. not quietly, publicly, actively campaigned for the man whose administration was crushing the Black Power movement from above. For Kareem, this was not a private political preference. This was a man with the biggest platform in the sport, pointing that platform at the people trying to destroy everything Kareem had put himself in danger to protect. That was strike one. Strike two came in that 1991 book. Wilt published generalizations about black women that described them as inferior, preferred white women openly, suggested a hierarchy of worth that mapped almost exactly onto the white slave master's gaze. Kareem, who understood that black women had been the backbone of black survival in America for centuries, read those pages and made a judgment that he has never walked back. Kareem's response came in his own book. He called Wilt a whining crybaby and a quitter. He noted that neither championship team Wilt played on ever repeated. He invoked Muhammad Ali's brutal assessment of Wilt as a man who could not talk, was ugly, and could not move. By summoning Ali's voice, Kareem placed himself on the side of righteous defiance and placed Wilt on the side of irrelevance. Wilt died in 1999. The verdict did not die with him. Kent Benson earned a different kind of unforgiveness. Not personal betrayal, systemic threat. Benson came out of Indiana University in 1977 as the #1 overall pick. He walked into his first NBA game barely 2 minutes in and drove an elbow directly into Kareem's solar plexus. Hard enough to double him over. Hard enough to knock the breath completely out of him. What happened next is what people reduce to a punch. But Kareem has described what actually happened in his mind in that moment. The arena disappeared. Benson stopped being a rookie. Kareem's mind went back to the streets of New York. This is survival. This man is going to keep coming. The playground rules applied now. Kareem fired a roundhouse right to Benson's eye, broke Benson's jaw, broke his own hand. He was fined a record amount, missed 20 games. Benson's career was permanently altered. Benson later said publicly that the incident taught him about forgiveness, that he had forgiven Kareem, that his faith gave him the framework for absolution. Kareem's lesson was different. His lesson was the terrifying discovery of his own capacity for damage. I could have killed him, he admitted. That is when I realized I had to control my temper at all times. Not because defending himself was wrong, because the consequences of his rage could be fatal. And in America, a black man whose rage turns fatal faces a justice system that was not built to treat that rage as survival. He never forgave the league culture that allowed Benson to walk onto that floor and attack him in the first 2 minutes of a season. He never forgave the system that made street justice the only available response. Bill Laimbeer earned contempt of a different flavor entirely. Lambeer was the son of a corporate executive, born into wealth in a league where most black players came from nothing and were playing for everything. Lambeer's game was built on physicality that bordered on endangerment, undercutting players in the air, throwing elbows at angles the referees consistently missed. The Bad Boys brand celebrated this as toughness. Kareem saw it as something else. A privileged man using his protection to harm the bodies of black artists who had made the game worth watching. The 1988 Finals, Game 6, championship on the line. Kareem launched a skyhook. The whistle blew. Lambeer was called for the foul. Detroit fans have argued about that call ever since. Kareem has never argued. "Check the tape," he said. "He made contact with my body." Lambeer's complaints were, to Kareem, the whining of a bully who finally got caught. There is no forgiveness here. Not because Kareem cannot forgive physical play, because Lambeer's violence was calculated, protected, and disproportionately aimed at the men who had the least institutional protection when they hit the floor. Robert Parrish is the exception that explains everything. Parrish made news recently when he publicly dismissed the entire Lakers organization with 3 exceptions: Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Cooper, James Worthy. When asked why Kareem earned that exemption from a rival who had battled him across some of the most brutal playoff series of the decade, Parrish answered plainly, "I respect Kareem because of what he did off the court for social justice." A black man from the segregated South who had grown up understanding exactly what that struggle cost, recognized Kareem as a brother in the fight. They had nearly destroyed each other between October and June for years. None of that touched what Parrish understood about why Kareem had stood where he stood when standing there was dangerous. Kareem can forgive the rival who respected the cause. That is the line. That has always been the line. I am 52 years old. I have watched basketball from close enough to see what the camera never shows. I have seen jealousy dressed as rivalry. I have seen pettiness dressed as competition. What I watched in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was something different. A man who decided at 20 years old that his platform belonged to something larger than his statistics, and who spent the next 60 years measuring every person he encountered against that standard, without apology, without revision, without the softening that age is supposed to bring. At 78, he is still writing, still issuing verdicts, still refusing to smile for audiences that want their legends comfortable. His unforgiveness is not bitterness, it is memory. It is the testimony of a man who stood 7 feet 2 inches tall and decided that height would be used to see history clearly, not to rise above it. That is the sequoia, unforgiving, unmoved, still standing.